What have always found interesting is this conversation about how do we put the earth at the heart of business, because it doesn't come up very often. And even looking at the well-being economy, the earth was conspicuously absent in many of the conversations that I was having as I was putting that research together. And where I sit, and where Earth Self sits, is looking at the human-earth relationship and what that means on a systemic level. And it's a really exciting moment because I get to sit back in this session, as I've been hosting the Future series, and Mark gets to step up and to lead some of the conversation. When I started talking about putting the earth at the heart of business, and we're going back 5 years, it was even more of an abstract conversation than it was today. And it's been a really interesting journey to look at systems, structures, and processes from an ecosystemic perspective of what does it really mean if we're going to create a sustainable world? Because if we're going to run around and stay stuck in our heads and not recognize the earth, there's a good chance that we're going to do the same old practices as normal, however well-intentioned we are. So with that, what I'd like to do is to start by sharing a short video. And I want to give a little bit more of a context to this video because some of you who've been attending the previous sessions will have seen the video of my granny that has been part and parcel of the conversations talking about her relationship with nature. And that video, unbeknown to me at the time, was recorded a week before my granny died. And this was part and parcel of my granny doing her life review. What had ended up happening is I had gone back to university to get an evidence base because people like science around the human nature connection so I could integrate it more into business. I was building Earth Self at the same time. And I was also the main caregiver for my granny. And for the last 3 months of her life, I more or less stopped working on the business to focus on what my granny wanted, which was to be able to die at home in her bed. And Mark comes into the story because, as you can imagine, it's hard enough building a business in today's climate. It's hard enough being at university, trying to do both at the same time and caregive for your granny is an incredibly challenging thing. And I was very burnt out, to put it mildly. And I ended up in the United States, living on a friend's farm, in a camper van that no longer worked, just simply so I could have time and space in nature. And Mark popped up, having successfully sold his renewable energy company and was looking for something a little bit different to do of how do we help leaders, organizations, businesses put the earth at the heart of business. And I was developing a coach training program for coaches at that time. And Mark came along and trained in that coach training program, graduated, and is now a guardian within Earth Self, which fundamentally means you're a shareholder. You also do some work as well, and you guide and shape the direction. Because one of the things that's been at the heart of Earth Self is there's a lot of great ideas out there, but some of them stay theoretical. And if we don't know how to put them into practice, there can be a huge disconnect. So with the story about my granny, one of the reasons I wanted to bring my granny into the conversation was to remember about what's important, but also to bring our ancestor, our elder wisdom into conversations. I'm going to go to the other side and I want to introduce Granny's great-granddaughter to lead us into this session, to remind us that we can learn from the past. What is this all about? It's really about the future and the future generations.
So every day I go outside, I go near trees, nice to them and like plant things. The thing that I love the most about it is because when I care about it, I just feel like somebody that cares for nature and loves it. One time that actually made me feel lovable about nature was, so we found this bird that would never leave Tabby's back garden. So we went to go see it, and when we went to go see it, a magpie attacked it. So we went to an abandoned place and buried it. So that actually made me feel good about nature and love and care for it. So that's why I'm talking about a whole lot of nature, and that's also why I started to work with my auntie, so that I could actually help with doing her job and helping keep nature healthy, so that things end up happier and life could end up getting really better. Hit record. So guys, this is me and this is what I was all looking at, and this is what I all love about it.
And with that introduction, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tabitha. That video is just epitomizes really a lot of what we're going to be talking about, I think, and a lot of what I stand for. And I remember sort of going back 15 years and being in business and having a sense that things could be done differently, more in connection with our own inner nature and with the planet. That's really driven me, and what I'm all about now is as Maisie says, there is creating a better place, creating a happier place, more harmony, and I think we all deep down crave that. So with that, let's look at the question that we've framed this session with. How do we put Earth at part of business? So maybe each of us is part of the Earth. We don't survive long if we're not provided with clean water and food. Every second we're breathing in fresh air, hopefully, and not always, but we're breathing in and breathing out. So we're connecting with nature, with Earth. So it's hard to argue that we're not already part of integral part of this ecosystem. The World Wildlife Fund also has done research which shows that the Earth delivers ecosystem services to society to the value of $125 trillion per year. That's about twice current global GDP. And it's not, a lot of that is not recognized, it doesn't appear on balance sheets or or in pricing of services and goods that the companies sell, but it's still there. So maybe Earth is already at the heart of business. And maybe Earth is just waiting for us to understand the potential for ourselves, the collective and businesses, of making that connection to Earth and understanding what that means for us as individuals and businesses. Just going to pause there and invite you to share what comes up for you before we move on. Just feel free to unmute yourself and come into the conversation.
I'll come in, Mark. So Mark, how did, obviously you had a business, a renewable business, so how did you end up making this transition to where you are now? You've obviously got a great passion for it, but how did that evolve?
Through really understanding my connection to Earth and being allowing that to direct me in life. So understanding what was really important for me and what my purpose was, and then following that, and which has led me to more meaning, looking for more meaning, and how I can best contribute what I have to offer to others and to businesses. So I hope that answers your question.
This is obviously not the first time you've had a conversation like this. So how have you felt that the people that you speak to, businesses and organisations, how are they actually taking note of this, and do you see change? The reason I'm asking that is because obviously I've been involved in numerous organisations where you're trying to implement change to help the environment, and I find sometimes you just feel like you're hitting your head off of a wall because it's all about the money. How have you found when you've been going out to organisations having this type of talk?
Yeah, I think it's finding people who are sufficiently open and who are interested in having this type of conversation, and starting there and supporting them to have wider conversations within their organization with people who they identify as also being interested. But I think the key thing is to, what is that potential that we're talking about? It's understanding that potential. What does it mean for our business? How can we benefit at the end of the day, at the same time as transforming our business to recognizing Earth at the heart of it, and that's probably starts with, well, it does start with people. Obviously, it starts with those of us who step forward and are sufficiently open and interested to birth this change.
That's the thing that I'm hoping to try and get out today is how I can take the knowledge from you guys and try and help educate others and try and kind of help move up the businesses that we speak to and deal with, as well as our own, in that kind of direction, and if there is anything we can take from it. So I'm just looking forward to hearing what other aspects we can take from this.
Thank you, Jamie. Is there anybody else who wants to share anything? If not, then I think we can look at a couple of companies, just short case studies, which might give you some ideas, and I look forward to your thoughts and comments on this. first one is a company called Gore, who actually have a manufacturing plant in Scotland, in Livingston.
Mark, the right slide's not come up. You're still on the previous slide there.
Oh, right. Okay. Here we are. Is that right? Yeah. So Gore are a multinational company founded in 1958 with a substantial turnover, and they're very interesting because they have really thought very differently about how they structure their organization. So they have 11,500 associates. Most companies would call them employees, but they refer to them as associates. This is probably one of the most interesting things, is they really see individuals as partners in the business. So, for example, they never recruit a leader. It's the associates in a team that suggest that an individual that has shown the right qualities steps forward as a leader. And all the team members are involved in recruiting any new associate. They also tend not to have any offices or facilities with more than 150 people working there, because they recognize that 150 is about the size of a village, and is what the human capacity is for having a relationship with other people. So beyond that, it's hard for us to maintain those sort of meaningful relationships. And this is a very highly successful company, very, very innovative, and in 2021 was recognised as the UK Centre of Excellence in Wellbeing. So here's an organisation that's recognised the importance of people and giving people the autonomy to make decisions, allowing the people to be out there sensing and gathering information upon which decisions are made. Another interesting organisation is Cliff Bars, the nutritional bars, and they have a different kind of bottom line. They describe their bottom line as consisting of people, community, planet, brands, and business. And their whole sustainability model is based around a tree. So they think like a tree, recognizing the full ecosystem of a tree, and the energy flows and waste, etc. So they think of their organization like that and measure their success and sustainability against that ecosystem and that model. For example, they've managed to offset 250,000 tons of carbon in the last 18 years. They have 100% renewable electricity running their plants. They've planted 250,000 trees, and they're also one of the, I think, the major investors in research into organic farming in the States. So different kind of organization, also highly successful. So again, I'm keen to hear from you if that has been if anything has come up for you, or if you've been inspired by anything in particular there. What are your thoughts? Jimmy.
Can I be a wee bit controversial? While you were
Please
chatting
do.
there, you mentioned a couple of companies. I was scribbling down things as Earth as a resource provider. And, you know, my mind went back to cave dwellers. Initially, you know, when humans were living in caves as their accommodation, and all they would do is go out and seek food and water, whether the food came from the plants or from the animals surrounding. But then they themselves progressed, I suppose, and built a wooden stockade for protection, and maybe grass and mud huts, you know, as accommodation, without reforesting, I suppose. And then they would move forward again and use clay or brick and or metals and alloys that they produce as they developed. Many of them they cannot put back into the earth. So when you were mentioning the companies, I'm thinking of the materials they're using, you know, to make the products. How can they replenish the materials that they're taking from the earth? I suppose if that's what you're trying to be, as using the earth as a resource, but giving back to it, it's how do you square that circle, I suppose?
I think what comes to mind is the concept that's called cradle to cradle, where designers of new products mainly products, etc., are thinking about what happens at the end of the original lifetime that's designed for this product. Can it be somehow adapted or used for another lifetime for a different application? So that's certainly one way. Another way is to sort of be questioning how we operate the sort of business models of that are prevalent at the moment, where we all, for example, own a fridge. How would it change things if manufacturers rented a fridge and stood for, you know, and had to guarantee a certain lifetime for that product? I suspect that they would think very differently about how long that fridge would last, how robustly it would be made, and we would maybe start to move away from you know, from the issues of products coming to the end of their life very, very quickly and being thrown into landfill. So I think there's this huge opportunity to think creatively and to upcycle, change the use. And there's a huge movement, you know, that's been going for 20 years behind this, and we just we need more and more companies to embrace this type of thinking. Anyone else with any thoughts to share?
Yeah, obviously me, and I don't want to be the one talking all the time here.
That's fine.
But the examples that you gave were fantastic. Do you have examples of smaller organisations? Because again, what I've found is the larger your organisation, the more time you can, or the more people's time you can afford to look at sustainability. But kind of smaller organisations, they kind of feel everybody needs to be accountable and be able to what would I call it? So basically, they're there to make the money. Do you have examples of smaller organisations that have taken the same type of steps?
I think it's always a wee bit more difficult to get hold of examples of smaller organisations, but the principles, Jamie, are the same, and that is that it starts with the business leader, perhaps, or somebody in a department who feels strongly about this, and it's just that coming together and having those conversations, and as I said earlier, sort of understanding the potential and the gains. You know, how can we embark on this journey and become more sustainable, but at the same time, it benefits the business, it benefits those of us working in the business, it benefits the stakeholders, the community that we're operating in. And it's I think first of all, it just requires that recognition that we see each other as the importance of each other to contribute to those conversations, and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no, I can. Sorry, Sandy. I can totally see that. I can totally see. I'm bought into it, so I'm fine. I can see it, but it's trying to get that across to others, and saying, right, well, see if you take a little bit of time aside to let people look at it. It won't just benefit you, the business, the organisation, your people, but it will also benefit your profits. Because it's trying to how to get that spin across to people effectively, so as they can see the overall benefits of it and start saying, right, well, we'll take somebody that's maybe operationally efficient for us at the minute and give them some time to afford to actually start looking at how we can do things different. Sorry about that, Sandy.
That's okay. No, I mean, I just wanted to pretty much pick up on what you're talking about there, Jamie. I mean, what's not to like when you look at these two case studies, just in terms of the stats and the detail and so on? I guess one of my questions would be, so, you know, it's a no-brainer. So what's getting in the way? What's holding other businesses, either in the same sectors, the same areas? What's holding them back? What are their challenges? Where are the incentives for to help businesses make the transition into putting Earth at the heart of what they do?
Thank you, Sandy. We'll hear from Jimmy. He's patiently got his hand out there.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's to answer Jamie. I've been a what if kind of guy most of my life, where I've tried to re-engineer products, to extend their life or repurpose them. And these are the ideas I've come up with. But Jamie, there was a young lady in Africa, went into the landfill sites and dug out all the plastics, chopped them all up and put them into a press and made monoblocks, paving monoblocks, and has made a small sustainable business. So it's, the innovation of a business there, I found fascinating. She just does that, and it's small, it's a social enterprise in that respect, and it could quite easily be scaled up, because the massive landfill that we have, all around the globe, brings in another resource, which won't biodegrade to an extent, in the landfill, but it can be used, as a means of either paving an area, making roads, or providing accommodation. And just when you asked there about small businesses, that was the one that immediately jumped into my head.
Yeah, and Jimmy, I think that's a fantastic business idea, and finding people that can come up with these innovative solutions is amazing. What I'm talking about is how we can actually start getting more of the existing small businesses that could make a difference. So if you look at, obviously, you've got your large global players out there that are all trying to make an impact on the sustainability and helping the environment. Maybe not as much, obviously, from the Earth's point of view, but they are trying to make some changes. But that's okay in a big scale. If you look at the number of SMEs we've got, I've just taken the UK as an example. I mean, the size and the number of these companies out there is huge. And if we could even get a small percentage of them to be able to look at how they could do things different, as Mark says, it may be that there's a full life cycle on the product. So it could be that you manufacture something, and then once it's kind of past or beyond its economical lifespan, there is then what is the next step for that? So as it goes somewhere and something else happens with it. But I don't see many people thinking that far forward. And I'll go back to the thing that I've said right at the beginning. It seems to be that for most SMEs, it's all about the money. And what Sandy was saying there is, what's the incentive, and what can the government and what can the country do to try and help companies do it? Because there will be people out there that want to make a difference, but they also need to pay their bills. So it's, how can we make sure that we can, that as a joint effort, get these kind of SMEs towards where they would like to try and be? And whether that's time, whether it's money, whether it's resources, all of these things I would imagine come into play. And that's where, again, from today, I'm hoping I can try and get some ideas on how we can try and help some people do that. Because I constantly, I mean, as I say, with what we do as a business, we're speaking to people regularly that are trying to do something and trying to make a difference. But they've not got the time or the money to do it. So we're trying to help them by looking at how they can do what we do as a business, which is condition monitoring and reliability of the plant, how we can do that different. So you're not having to send people to site, you're looking at online solutions, you're looking at remote monitoring and stuff like that. So you're saving them energy, you're saving them downtime, and saving on a lot of the big repair works that they would probably do. So yeah, that's how I can see I can make a difference. But you do speak to people out there that are going, well, I would like to try and do more, but how do we do it? How do we go about it? How do we finance it? So yeah, like I said, the idea of that person doing the recycled plastic, that's brilliant. And through the stuff that Gavin's been doing with a lot of the kind of the future people, some of the ideas these guys are coming up with are amazing. But we still need to put them into practice. As Tabitha said earlier, there's so many great ideas out there, but they just go into a big idea pot that goes round like that and it doesn't go anywhere. It's how do we make sure these things can actually happen? And we need people that at high levels in different places to be able to back these things and be able to turn them into something that's actually achievable, rather than it just being a great idea that sits there and we talk about it for the next 10 years.
If we were to take sorry, I just walked in there. My apologies. I normally raise my hand.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
But to take the example you said there about the hundreds of thousands of SMEs, I know that SPAR started off with this whole element to save the small local grocery going to the likes of Costco, not Costco. What do you call them? The distribution centres and picking up the fruit market, the fish market, the flower market. They began to set them up as small cooperatives, and then they would deliver all of the goods. That was saving them time and money because they had the cooperative to buy in bigger bulk. Therefore, they were able to negotiate cheaper products. And I suppose if you were to look at all the SMEs and identify, either the admin or the paperwork or the delivery and resources to them, then small cooperatives could spring up all over the place, making them, the small businesses, more economical and creating one or two other jobs. So there's an opportunity, I suppose, if you were to examine it properly. I don't know how often people do that, but it sprung into mind as you were chatting.
Yeah. Can I just come in here? Because I kind of want to sit from two perspectives here in terms of what's needed as an ecosystemic approach, because we're still looking at businesses within isolation. And this is something that, as we evolve the Scottish Net Zero community, we're very much looking at. And this is, even when it comes back to if we're putting the earth at the start of business, and Jamie, you're talking about that hardest part is to get people on the journey because they are focused on, well, it has to be about profit. It's okay because you can make money by being more effective. When you look at it and even modeling from the earth is one of the most ruthless businesses going, right? If you look at the 4.5 billion years that it's been in existence, 99% of life on earth has become extinct. What exists today is 1%. So in terms of achieving its purpose, it is incredibly ruthless in getting rid of everything that's no longer needed. So that starting point of that journey, it has to be, and this is for me over the last 10 years of how I've always worked with this, it's what's the pain point for people, and most of the time it is actually the profit based. If you start reducing things, then you're saving money. it still comes back to, yes, there's the operational bit, but the human bit, you know, that Mark was talking about, because if you're stressed, burnt out, that's got a cost on your business that's not fully accounted for. When you're actually taking a step back, and we're going to show a model and a framework that can potentially help with that. When you take a step back and become fully resourced, you're actually receiving health and well-being benefits from that time spent in the earth. But I think the thing that's more interesting and more fascinating, you know, because there's this big gap, as you've highlighted. How do we get people to get started? And then we've got these wonderful case studies of people too far down the journey. Where's the bridge? When I started Earth Self, I spent a lot of time interviewing sustainable business leaders because I had a hunch. And I was like, I know there's something more about this human-earth connection that's not being talked about, because exactly as Mark had said, the earth's already at the heart of business. It just seems to be that we keep on forgetting it from the conversation. So I would go and I would speak to these people. And I mean, we're talking about from big organizations right down to small startups. And there was 176 sustainable business leaders, Jamie, that I spoke to. And I deliberately asked them about the time that they spent in nature and the impact on it. And I know I'm stepping over a little bit here, Mark, to talk a little bit about this. What happens when you spend time in nature is that you learn to actually start mimicking and modeling the patterns, which is systems thinking. And this is this ecosystemic approach. So if you take the tree model, you think like a tree. How about if you think like a forest? Now, the thing that's really fascinating, and this is where, you know, as we build the Scottish Net Zero community, it doesn't happen in isolation. You need as many businesses as possible in the initial conversations. And what you need to do is you need to be able to identify the stronger trees, i.e. the stronger businesses, and then the weaker businesses as well. And you need to start identifying what's the resource exchange that can be done back and forward between businesses. And there is no other way that we can do this and make this shift and get people on board unless there's a stronger voice than more than just one or two people running around. Because, you know, to use that analogy, a tree by itself does not make a forest. But what's really fascinating is from an ecosystemic perspective within a forest, it's the smaller trees, the smaller plants, the smaller companies that most of the resource exchange happens between, because it happens quicker and it happens faster. The older trees are actually stabilizing the network, providing information and resources. So fundamentally, you know, and this, I suppose this isn't answering the question, and you're getting a little bit of processing here from me as I've been sitting listening to the entire conversation from the Future series. The only way that we can do this is by setting up these networks that says, what do you have that is actually a waste, a drain on your resources, you know? And I'm sure if you were part of that conversation, you'd be able to identify either within your own business or the businesses that you're talking about, what's the stuff that's actually costing you money in your business? Who's got a solution for that? And then that's the part and parcel of the conversation that needs to happen moving forward. So it's not only an ecosystemic solution, it's a long-term perspective, which doesn't help you right in that beginning moment. But when we're starting getting people on the journey, the easiest way is, well, it's going to save you money. And it comes back to that. And it's always really interesting. You know, it's like we're having this conversation, how do you put the heart at the heart of, or how the earth at the heart of business? When I've been working with businesses and SMEs over the last 10 years, I've never really mentioned earth. I've focused on what they've needed and actually helped them solve their problems, which is why sometimes people will come into Earth Self and go, oh, we're going to be really explicit in talking about earth. And it's like, no, because it doesn't work. You have to speak in the language of the people and the businesses that you want to work with. And I'm going to take a step back there, Mark, to see if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think you know the systems thinking is so important, and I'm thinking of an example of you know, like a distillery, for example, which ends up with lots of hot water at the end of the process. And when my time in renewable energy, you know, I saw this time again, and it was just hot, big cylinders of cooling tanks outside, waiting for the water to cool down. And you know, a few of them understood that that was actually a resource that they could sell to a neighbour, and as hot water for heating, for example, or some other process. And I think this is something that it's exactly as you're saying, Tavi, that we need to get this businesses together, understanding what they're and talking about what their issues are, their challenges, and then boiling it right back down for a minute to you know, meeting businesses where they are. So many people are stressed today. So many people are really struggling in their roles. And when individuals are stressed, they're not able to think creatively. So it's also very important we think about well-being as part of this. And Jamie, I don't know whether you know that's something that a forum that you could set up to invite, you know, customers or employees of customers to some sort of event where, you know, you're taking them outside and supporting them to de-stress, basically. And that's also a very important ingredient and a way of meeting businesses where they are, and because many businesses recognize that their people are not performing as well as they could and enjoying their working lives.
Yeah, well, sorry, can I come in again there? I'm part of a group called it's called the Fit Your Dads, and that's one of the big things that we try and focus on, and it's all about mindfulness and well-being and people's mental health. So there's a kind of, they call it a triangle, where you've got obviously work, family, and basically your mindfulness, and keeping that triangle as balanced as possible. But one of the things, again, we did a charity event recently where it was getting people to go and do something outdoors, a little challenge for themselves, and it's something that we're going to do at least twice a year. And we managed to get three people that weren't part of our business, four people that weren't part of our business out doing something, walking hills and in the woods, and we ended up doing the Three Peaks thing. And again, I think the whole idea of it's fantastic. But then trying to get people released to be able to do it, and you just go, what's the difference in somebody being out of their work for a day to get out and do something? It's not going to, your business isn't going to fall down because somebody's leaving it for a day. But it's this whole world of everybody's too busy, and I'm terrible for it. I mean, I've been wanting to go into about 6 or 7 different sessions last week, but obviously other things had to take priority. But yeah, doing things like that and trying to get people involved, I think is a fantastic idea, Mark. It's going to take time though, and that's one of the big things for this. Is it's the same as any kind of change management situation. You're trying to get people to change and evolve, and sometimes it takes time, and it might be that you've got 1, 2, 3, and then as you see it, will start growing and growing and growing when people start seeing the benefits of it. And sorry, Tabitha, one of the things that you were saying there, I think that looking at the ecosystem model and the trees, and I think that's a great way to explain it. I think that was fantastic.
No,
I might steal that.
Well, you can steal it. But the thing is, though, to implement it, and this is the catch-22 situation, to implement it, you actually have to be able to be outside. Otherwise, you actually can't see the connections and the functions and how it works. And this is also not the baby beginner step, you know, so this is bizarre. And I think I'm conscious we're into the last 10 minutes, and I don't want to stay with the forest ecosystem. I also want to give you a different framework as well to help you start thinking about this systemically and the journeys that you can take people on to understand the relationships. Because I talk a lot, And because Mark will know I had said I'm going to sit back, and Mark's like, all right, Tabby, you've talked a little bit too much here, which I'm known for. I want to show you another wee video, okay, because it's a really simplistic framework to get you to start thinking about these connections, and then also to actually sit and think about that journey into the ecosystem from the baby beginner steps all the way down to actually embodying the earth into the heart of the perspective. And what I will say in terms of, just as a wee preface of this simplistic model, by the way, combines circular economy, combines biomimicry, combines ESG, systems thinking, circular economy, because what one of the other guardians of Earth Self did, Lynn Mann and I, when we started out, you know how Stephen Covey says, let's begin with the end in mind. It's a great question, unless you're actually in sustainability and you're sitting thinking 20, 30, 50 years in the future. And what we did is we literally went and researched all of the emerging movements and said, how can we distill this into a simple journey that people can start thinking about? So I'm curious to hear just some of your thoughts as I bring this up for you. Right. Earth-connected capital is the value that's created within an organisation by fully activating the human-earth relationships that exist within it. To do this, we first need to become aware of the different dimensions of these relationships. Then we need to ensure that the organisation is driven by values that support a deeper connection with Earth. From here, we're able to be inspired by potential solutions already held within the Earth's ecosystems. These solutions help us change our thought from linear thinking patterns to circular, systemic ones. And this allows us to ensure net zero is embodied throughout our entire organisational structures, systems, processes and practices. We start with the Earth itself, recognising that our organisation can either function as part of the Earth's ecosystem and help sustain life, or function separately and help destroy life. And that's where the Net Zero Accelerator can help you get started with measuring your carbon emissions. Yet the greatest asset an organisation has, its employees, who hold the potential for catalysing an organisation's net zero journey. Yet these employees need a conscious relationship with Earth, not only to access its ability to improve health and well-being, but also to tap into its capacity to stimulate creativity and innovation. What's key though is that we recognise employees as individuals, each with unique strengths and capabilities. As individuals, we have families and we're embedded within communities. For any organisation to embed net zero at the heart of how it works, it has to successfully navigate the complexities of the relationship between individual, family and community as part of the way that the employee functions, because this is what's essential to the success of the organisation on its net zero journey, and what helps the organisation tap into the full potential of its Earth connected capital. So now that I've done my wonky voice there, which sounds very posh and professional in the video, only to save time. Mark, do you want to facilitate and see what's kind of coming up for people in the last 5 minutes?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, was there anything in the video that you want to ask or comment on, first of all?
Can I just say it was a great wee video? Thank you very much. I like the structure of it. But to bring in something that popped into my head again, when you were talking about the forest analogy, the strong trees, strive to get the sun, from, the canopy, and any seedlings and things like that generally just fade and waste. And all
Can
you're left
I
with is
jump
mulch.
in
Aye.
there, Jimmy? The research, and there's numerous books on this, actually challenges that. That was a way of thinking that existed previously. What's actually shown is in a healthy, mature, and I want to make the distinction here between an unhealthy forest ecosystem and a healthy forest ecosystem. In a healthy, mature forest ecosystem, there's actually what's known as a shade canopy, and the bigger trees actually start growing and making specific shapes to keep thin beams of light so that the light can actually come in and encourage growth underneath. And, you know, that part I think is hugely important. You know, when it comes back to this is why we need to be connected and understand how the earth's working from the ecosystem there, because we're so conditioned to competition, you know, and I've had this in conversations where people will turn and go, oh, but there's competition in nature. In a healthy ecosystem, go and do your research and see how much competition exists. Slim to none. It's immature species that compete, mature species that are, you know, that exist for long-term survival. They only function in collaboration.
It'd be good if the business world did that.
Well, we're on the journey, Jamie, and you know, to reiterate that point and bring it back to, you know, Scottish Net Zero community, the fact that I'm sitting here, you know, giving up a hell of a lot of my time to run, you know, 2-week future series and 2 in-person events, you know, with the awesome support of the Net Zero Ninjas, is not for the good of my health. It's because it's one of the most collaborative places that I've seen in business to date in Scotland, you know, and I know from having the conversations with Gavin and James where they sit with their levels of integrity and how much they're focused on collaboration. And it goes back to, you know, what Martin Valenti said. If you weren't able to catch the live stream of our second event on the 2nd, you know, which was hosted at the Lighthouse, bringing it back to that point, which the replay, I've just got the video, so the replay is going to be there. Martin Valenti highlights the point that currently we have 800 SMEs within the Scottish Net Zero community. 10 years from now, if 600 of them succeed and 200 of them have failed, we've not done a good enough job. This really is about ensuring the survival of everybody. And that is the intention within the Scottish Net Zero community and what we are kind of weaving behind the scenes as well. You know, Stuart, Nina and Juliet and I and even Rob are having lots of conversations about how we develop this as an ecosystemic service, you know, using actually that forest analogy, because even if you indulge me, I'll go off tangent for a little bit of history impact, right? But when the Romans were taking over the world, you know, they came to Scotland, they got as far as Falkirk with the Anton Wheel. They only managed to hold that for 20 years. And the Picts, which, you know, big broad spectrum, kept on pulling them off. The reason that the Picts resisted the bureaucracy, the centralized, you know, whatever you want to call the Roman army with its civilized action, was because 1, they were connected to nature, but 2, in the face of a greater adversity, they came together and said, you know, it doesn't matter if we didn't get along. You know, if we've got a beef with your clan, we're actually going to come together because there's a greater threat. There's very few places in the entire world where that energy and that ancestry exists, you know, and is documented in books. That's the type of energy that we want to bring into the community so that all the businesses within the community band together and we are stronger because of it. It gets back to that point, Jamie, you know, and I think it's maybe something to follow up after, you know, the 2-week series. What do you need within your business? How can the Scottish Net Zero community help? And that's part of what we're really developing. Sandy there, Jimmy there, you know, that it's almost like it's a non-negotiable. Those conversations are happening and they're going to be continuing to happen because COP comes and goes. You know, it can be a lot of noise. Energy moves on to Egypt and COP27. But actually, what's the legacy for Scotland? Well, the legacy for Scotland is we've got a heck of a lot of SMEs with a heck of a lot of value, you know, even just from what Sandy said about what Remarkable offers, Jamie, what you do, Jimmy, you talked about the Rotary and how it can help, Mark, what we've got in Earth Self, Nina, Juliet, Stewart, what's sitting within the Scottish Net Zero community there. It's like that woven together and actually translated into action. That's the legacy of these events and what will happen moving forward, because there are people like you showing up and saying, but how do I do this? Well, maybe if we all learn from each other and actually amplify our voices, amplify our movement, we can find that way to actually shorten that span. And I'm going to stop because otherwise I'll go on systemic rants with history and God knows whatever else. And I'm conscious that we're 1 minute over time.
I would just add to that, Tabby, that, you know, we have it in our DNA in Scotland that, you know, there's that famous book, How Scots Invented the Modern World. We have this enormous amount of creativity and able to step up in times of adversity. And so I'm really, really excited about the potential for, you know, these weeks and months ahead that here we are, that we can come together and take action. I'm not waiting for government, not waiting for COP, not waiting for anyone else. It's down to us. We can all play our part as individuals and businesses. And with that, thank you all very much for being part of this conversation this morning. And we look forward to further conversations as the week goes on.